All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sue Atkins. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations at Tufts. And John Sanford, who's our Assistant Director of Employer Relations, is my co-host for this evening. We're excited to have all of you joining us for one of our first summer programming sessions, which highlights our employers on the East Coast. We're excited to have our panelists coming from 3 very different industries to talk about their organizations and what's happening in terms of their hiring currently to help our 2020 graduates and also early and young alums from Tufts. So we're just very thankful to have the session. Just some housekeeping things. We are going to record the session, so please make sure to put your profile on mute for right now. We will be taking questions throughout the session this evening, so you can put those in the chat function and list them either to everyone or anonymously. It's entirely up to you, but we are going to be addressing questions kind of later on in the session. So we're excited about that. And just to kick things off, I'll do some quick introductions of our panel this evening. So I will bring up, let's see, our panelists here. So here's our group of panelists that are joining us this evening. So first off, we have Tamika Grady. She is a recruiter at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Dana-Farber has locations in Boston, of course, headquartered here, but also has other locations throughout Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And obviously we'll be talking about the healthcare industry this evening. Jessica Marotta is our talent acquisition manager. She comes from Forrester, and they do some exciting work in analytics, in client services, as well as research. And they're located throughout the United States. They have several locations across the East Coast, as well as internationally in Europe and the Asia Pacific region of the world. So I'll introduce her, so I'm excited about that. And then lastly, Connor Rooney is our Director of Recruitment from Carney Sando and Associates. They're based here in Boston, and they recruit both nationally and internationally in the education sector, both teaching roles, but administrative roles as well in a variety of schools. So welcome to all 3 of you to our panel this evening. I will have you do some introductions as well, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything in my quick introduction. So maybe we can, Tamika, you could speak a little bit about your background, and I'll have Connor go, and then Jessica.
Sorry, I was on mute. Well, okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Sue. Well, it's nice to meet all of you today. I'm happy to spend this time speaking with you. So as Sue mentioned, my name's Tamika. I'm a recruiter at Dana-Farber. I want to say I probably have about 12 years of HR experience with my focus in talent acquisition. So I've worked in different sectors, including hospitality, alum. So Harvard University was there as well, and now Dana-Farber. Dana-Farber is pretty well known, but we focus mainly on the treatment of and support of our adult and pediatric cancer patients. We do a lot of research as well. As Sue mentioned, Dana-Farber is expanding. So we have these new satellite locations that are opening in the North and South Shore of Boston. Chestnut Hill will be opening in maybe just about 6-7 months, depending on where we stand with COVID. But Dana-Farber, you know, one of our doctors, Dr. Kalen, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2019. Last year, you probably read that Dana-Farber has a very close affiliation with Boston Children's Hospital. So Dana-Farber, with the affiliate of Boston Children's, was awarded the top best children's hospital to work with. So certainly now is a good time to start doing your research and looking into the Institute. It's a lot going on.
Great, thank you. Connor, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for logging in. Thanks, Sue, for setting this up. So I'm Connor. I'm from Carney Sando and Associates. We sound like a law firm, but we're pretty much the opposite of a law firm. We do a lot of direct work with schools, particularly independent private schools. So private schools themselves, charter schools, magnet schools. So we act as an extension of these schools' hiring practice. So we recruit teaching job seekers. Major percentage of our candidate pool, so to speak, are early career folks, college seniors, graduate students, because these schools, of course, don't require teaching certification. Really good avenue to get the foot in the door, an exploratory role in teaching. I did one myself for a year, graduated Bowdoin College 3 years ago, taught for a year, and now I'm on board Carney Sando myself, working for them. So like Sue said, we're based in Boston. We do work nationally. So I'll speak a little bit to the hiring picture at our schools. Education, as you all know, as students or recent alums, was really rocked and really changed dramatically by the pandemic. So we're feeling that ourselves as an organization, but definitely with the schools that we represent. A lot of changes have been implemented and more changes coming down the pike. So excited to speak with you all, or at least, hear some questions and speak about my experience.
Great. Thanks, Connor. And Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, jump right in. Connor, I'm excited to hear about you. So as a parent who became a teacher with my teacher hat this year, I'm excited to hear about the things that are happening with you guys. So manager over at Forrester in talent acquisition. I fell into recruiting the day after I graduated college. And so I'm going to share my age. Obviously, I've been doing it for about approximately 20 years. Always in HR, always in recruiting. Love it, first love. I tend to be a little bit more of a dinosaur when it comes to staying with companies. I've only really worked at 3 companies during that time, finance, wireless infrastructure, and now research and advisory. So Forrester is a research and advisory company that really tries to help other organizations be more successful with their customers.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks so much, Jessica. Let me go through our, just a quick agenda update. So essentially, we'll be kind of going through who's hiring and diving into some deeper questions, which I know all of you are really interested in hearing from. And then we'll have time for student questions, as I mentioned, for those of you who just joined us. We ask that you put your questions in the chat function, and you can do that by posting your question to everyone or privately send that, and we'll be addressing those a little bit later on. And I know some of you submitted questions ahead of time, so we're looking forward to addressing those as well. So we'll be getting to those later on. But again, we're excited to be here. So let's dive in. I think students are interested to hearing from each of you. So in terms of starting, I guess, what have been the impacts in terms of the pandemic on your organization and on your industry? I'd love to get each of your perspectives in terms of, where we are. And I don't know, Jessica, if you'd like to start, that would be great. Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, the one that we all are faced with right now, most out there, is the remote aspect. So moving an entire company globally to remote was interesting. So working through those kinks. Forrester, we have an events organization as well. And so we have a lot of conferences that we had to pivot quickly and move to virtual. Those are huge revenue generating events, including the largest one in early May, our summit. And we actually were highlighted in Forbes as one of the companies that was successful in transitioning to that fairly quickly. So what I'll say is those are 2 big technology driven logistical type changes. I've become much closer to my teams and the managers I work with. What I'll say is that I was working remotely twice a week anyway, but now I do all of my meetings via face-to-face. So even if I have, hey, can I pick your brain for 5 minutes? I jump on video. So the relationships that I built with folks are really strong right now. I think those are probably the biggest impacts.
Mm-hmm. And what about industry-wise? Are you seeing anything dramatically different in terms of the industry of research and client services? What are some of the things that you think are changing in the landscape there?
You know, the change is going to be the remote aspect. I go back to it, right? A huge amount of what we do, for example, a lot of the positions we recruit for that are a little bit more senior require 50% of travel because they're in front of clients so often. And we're moving more and more of those to these virtual, and it actually showing, hey, we can do this virtually, and clients are still getting the meat that they need. So I think that is going to impact the research organization. I'm sorry, the research industry as a whole. Gartner, IDC, consulting companies out there as well are going to be able to do more of their work, which at the end of the day saves the company the T&E expenses.
Mm-hmm. So you see some positive outcomes.
I do.
As well as the more challenging things that happened initially in this time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Tamika, would you like to answer that? So kind of what have you seen in terms of your organization and kind of the healthcare industry, which I'm sure is quite dramatic right now. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. It's a lot going on. So piggybacking what Jessica said, we too had to figure out how to do things remotely. 80% of our staff are now fully remote. So just trying to find a way to still be effective virtually was very difficult for us being in a medical setting. In addition to that, like our new hire orientation classes, those went all virtual as well. So instead of welcoming our new hires on campus in a room with other new hires, we're doing it all now virtually. So in addition to trying to make our staff of the Institute feel okay, we're trying to make the new hires feel welcomed and supported. So we had to rebuild our entire training program and just do a lot of constant check-ins. We're on a lot of Zoom meetings, but it's been working out. So it's just a different way of doing things. In addition to the industry, when this all started back in early March, mid-March, I want to say, we've seen a decline in patients coming in for their elective care treatments. A lot of patients probably had symptoms, but they didn't call in because they were scared for the obvious reasons. When the governor lifted that, we started to see increases of patients coming into the site. Right now, I want to say we've very recently increased our population size of the Institute. I think it was just 50% of the normal could be there, which was a lot if you include all the employees of the Institute. So now we're welcoming patients with one caregiver, which is great. So since we've started to do more in that aspect, we've started to see a spike in candidates, in patients. Very recently, we started to pick back up on our research and opening the wet and dry lab. So we're getting there. We just had to figure out how to do it differently, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I noticed that Dana-Farber has a new logo, right? So there's, kind of a new view and look to the organization. And does that change your mission and scope a little bit too, it seems? Or?
Yeah, it didn't change our mission necessarily, but 2019 is when we changed our logo. If you remember, the previous logo was red, and when you look at something with red, like it stands out with a negative context behind it. So we changed our logo mid 2019 just to make it stand out a little better. But our mission still stays the same. So really, the mission of the Institute is to provide expert, compassionate care to, again, our pediatric and our adult patients. What's great about Dana-Farber is that if you're a cancer patient, you're coming in and you're obviously meeting with a doctor who's educated and focused in oncology, but we have doctors that do the work, and there's many different types of cancer. There's many different types of oncology. So we have a doctor for each specialty, which makes the Institute very special because you really have someone who knows the know and who could guide you in the right direction. So our mission remains the same. Our goal is to really try to find a cure, but in the meantime, we're really focused on providing the best care.
No, that's great. All right, thank you. And Connor, last but not least.
Sure.
your,
So,
your thoughts and changes.
yeah, obviously we've had to navigate a similar challenge of transitioning everything to remote work. I guess twofold for us because of the schools that we represent. Being very client facing towards them has also been a challenge. We host hiring conferences that had to be converted to virtual. I myself visit maybe 40 to 50 colleges and universities every fall and spring. That's been disrupted, of course. We go and visit the client schools that we work for, so the K-12 schools. We had to obviously roll back those plans. So it's been really difficult to be so client facing as we traditionally pride ourselves on being, and being very communicative with both our candidates and our schools. Difficult to collaborate. Of course, you know, you all have experienced this in just the virtual Zoom fatigue, and not being so face-to-face has been really, really difficult. I guess more relevant to this question is the transitions that we're seeing in education in the school market. Naturally, we've seen a real big decrease in hiring volume and the roles being offered at schools. Of course, they're facing, in my mind, kind of a three-headed monster in terms of their difficult decisions in navigating the pandemic. The first of which being, what does their enrollment look like? Second of which, a huge concern is financial situation. That goes pretty hand in hand with enrollment, of course. And then thirdly, is the functionality of school. Will they be in the classroom? Will they be virtual? Will they be some sort of hybrid model? And that, of course, affects everything, trickle-down effect in terms of who they might be planning to hire, who they might be planning to move on from. And it's just a major kind of mess of different problems that these schools are navigating. Since we work nationally, of course, the pandemic, the virus has affected different regions differently. A school that we're working with in Vermont is planning to reopen pretty much as normal in August or late August and September, whereas schools that we're working with in the southeastern United States, as you all have been following the news, they're dealing with another major spike in cases. The past couple weeks, those schools have basically had to reverse course, because a month ago they told us we're business as usual, and that I don't want to dive into that because I'm sure you all have been following that news, but it's been a really bad reversal of fortune in those locations. So we're crossing our fingers that the clarity comes, for better or for worse, to these schools very soon. So will they take the plunge and plan for some sort of virtual model or hybrid model? And if that's the case, what will their personnel, their staffing look like? So we're in an information gathering stage where we're just being good listeners and good kind of liaisons with these schools, learning about what their anticipated needs are, if we can offer any sort of consulting support for them navigating these challenges. We've gotten, I think, really good at connecting with these schools with their virtual education platforms, which have been a really mixed bag. There are some schools that have been really excellent at offering virtual classrooms, and schools that have been pretty lax or pretty lackluster in their offerings. So, and then on the flip side, on the one hand, we're working with our schools, kind of getting that information, and then we're working with candidates, students like yourselves who are job seeking. And of course, that volume has been sort of the flip side of the schools, where we're seeing a lot more volume of folks coming to us saying that they're thinking about teaching, maybe as a second or third option for them, or they've been laid off, they've been furloughed, and they're considering other roles. So we're taking on a lot of new candidates. We're helping these folks explore and navigate this uncertainty as best as we can. But unfortunately, with the education industry, we're just kind of in a wait and see mode, where we hope clarity comes in the next month or so. But again, it seems like a day by day things change, which is really scary and kind of the reality that we live in. And yeah, I guess generally that's how I'd say the virus has impacted us.
Do you have a sense of the breakdown that you're seeing in terms of virtual roles versus in-person roles right now, just as a kind of quick data point?
Yeah, believe it or not, we're seeing very, very few roles that have virtual components that schools have listed with us so far. Independent schools, private schools are very community focused, meaning that they will try till their very last breath to have an on-campus aspect to this upcoming school year. These schools were basically put into an emergency management mode where they needed to switch up everything. And so they're planning for, or they're at least prepping for the reality that they may have to offer more virtual teaching options and to prepare for hopefully a better, more robust system of doing that. But right now their hope and their ideal scenario would be bringing students back. So we're actually not seeing very many roles that are remote only or have a virtual component, but of course, you know, we can expect that might change very soon.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So moving to the next question, obviously our theme is East Coast and trends that you might be seeing on the East Coast. And, you know, our students who are listening and watching, you know, want to know how do our graduates respond to this changing landscape? So maybe you could talk a little bit about, you know, what you're seeing East Coast wise and how should our students kind of respond to this changing market right now. And I don't know, Tamika, if you want to start kind of with that question.
Tamika, you're on mute.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
I'm muting myself too because I have my child here.
No worries.
But I was just saying, I don't know if I could necessarily speak to what's happening on the East Coast, but I could speak for your job search in general. I could tell you for sure that your interview more than likely will be done virtually. A lot of things are happening in a different manner. This is not my first time speaking with students about their job search and what to expect. It's going to be very different, honestly. I know that we've just started to do this chat feature in our applicant tracking system as a way to proactively just connect with candidates in a different fashion. So if candidates just was checking out our website and there was a position of interest, but they wasn't sure to apply, you can now chat with a recruiter. That wasn't thought about before COVID. That's just something we brainstormed in talent acquisition to just find a way to do things a little differently to still yet be effective. So I do think as you're in your job search, you'll notice that a lot of your interviews would happen either through telephone, a lot certainly through Zoom for sure. But again, just things happening in a different manner. We are bringing candidates to the Institute to start. We have not delayed start dates at Dana-Farber. So if you've received an offer, your start date remains the same. You may though be starting in a virtual capacity instead. And that's to my point earlier of how we had to revamp our onboarding and the training in general. So the Institute right now, we do offer quite a few virtual opportunities. These opportunities were not virtual pre-COVID, but we had to make a way to allow that to happen so that we could bring the candidates in and to just continue doing what we need to do. I really think that a medical business is essential. And if we have cancer patients out there and their treatments being delayed and they're not able to get seen, we're not doing the research, then we're going to have another problem to figure out is to now how to care for these patients who missed out on that. So we tried to be very proactive up front when we knew about this being a pandemic. But, you know, once you connect with someone from Dana-Farber, you just realize that it's just a different feeling now. But we certainly still, of course, try to do our best to have that client relationship, but not only client relationship, but relationship with our candidates that are continuous. So I think that's a trend, certainly, is the remote aspect.
Great, thank you. Jessica, how about what you're seeing in terms of the locations that you have across the East Coast, and you know, how can our Tufts students kind of interact with Forrester?
Yeah, so one, I always encourage anyone, students, job seekers, you know, in the market for 40 years, in the market for 40 seconds, reach out to people on LinkedIn. So many people are open to networking. especially since people have so much downtime right now. So one, I think more and more people are, like I said, are open to having the conversation. So leverage your LinkedIn when you're interested in a company. That would be one. Two, as Tamika said, things are, in this flux. And so you may join a company remotely, but that doesn't necessarily mean you won't ever be in an office. So think about that and ask those questions as going in. I don't know that I can speak to any specific trends right now. It's just been such an odd time these past few months. What I will say is trends in general, you're seeing a lot of data in roles, you're seeing a lot of, research in roles. So try to, even if you don't have, I go back to what Tamika said. It's interesting. I saw a job posting recently where in the posting, they actually have something around confidence. And even if you're not sure that this is the job for you, but you're interested, apply, right? More and more companies are open to shedding your skin and trying something new on for size. So if you see a marketing position and you majored in something else, but you're really interested, there are a lot of skills that are transferable, and it's the recruiter's job to work with you to figure that out, right? Yeah, so I think that those are some trends that I would mention.
Okay, great. And Connor, how about you in terms of what things you're seeing across the schools and the regions across the East Coast that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, tough to put a finger on the pulse of any trend. Anytime we think we've observed a trend or expecting a trend, it stops, or that trend ends up not being the case. We know that East Coast schools are dealing with a whole host of different challenges. Like I said before, enrollment, financial, it's not just health. Obviously, health is a huge concern, but schools have, clients that they work with, parents and students and families. These schools, especially in the East Coast, Boston is our largest market. They're very resourceful. Those tend to be schools with the larger endowments, so they're kind of prepared, at least financially, to deal with this type of situation, though probably not to this extent. So they are resourceful, and that we expect them to adapt to the different situations that they may find themselves in the fall. So what my other colleagues here have said, I definitely echo, is be proactive, reach out to folks on LinkedIn, tap into any network that you have available to you. We're a third-party resource, which is a really nice resource in normal times, air quotes, but even better now, because we exist simply to help you, to learn about opportunities. So be proactive, be patient. I know it's difficult. If you feel like you're not making progress, or you feel that you're backtracking, it is really challenging. Flexibility is really great to have right now. If you can, if it's at all possible, avoid being rigid with the location that you're looking in, with the type of environment, or the type of, in our case, type of school that you'd be open to. Schools and teachers really had to learn as they go in this past spring, and we expect that to continue for the foreseeable future. So as a job seeker, lean into that. Be of that mindset that you should learn as you go, be flexible, again, avoid being rigid, be professional, and yeah, just those are kind of the biggest takeaways I have. East Coast wise, it's hard to tell. We do work with tons of schools in the East Coast, but they're in really different positions. So, but across the board, no matter your interest, no matter the industry that you're hoping to go into, be proactive as much as you can. Again, patience is really great. And yeah, use your resources, reach out, tap into that alumni network. I'm sure Tufts has a really strong one. So use your resources, use Sue, use your other folks in the career office.
Well, that's great. And the trend, it seems like, is there isn't a trend.
Yeah.
Every area is kind of handling things a little bit differently and addressing based on the environment that they're in that particular state or region, depending on what's going on with that school system as well. So thank you. Moving to the next question, I think this is probably the question that most of our graduates and alums who are job seeking are looking for is, what roles do you have now that are open? What are some of the common kind of positions that our early graduates can access and that you have available? And, what are some of the top skills, you know, that they'll need to kind of fill those positions and be really solid candidates to be considered. And so I don't know, Jessica, if you could start with that question, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So Forrester, we hire those right out of school. Most popular is probably our research associate role. So they act as project managers slash program coordinators to our analysts that are actually putting out the thought leadership. So you actually get to be in a position where you are contributing to reports that are influencing the marketplace, right? So Forrester puts out you know, we'll say approximately about 1,500 reports annually, and only 10 to 15% of those are, this is what the state of the market is today. Here's what's happening today. Everything else is forward thinking, future looking. So that's a really cool role. And we see a lot of those folks move to other roles within an organization, our organization or elsewhere. Other positions, things such as entry-level sales, those are cool because, you know, typically you're not on a commission. Some of them you're not on a commission plan. Really, it's getting your foot into the door with an organization. It gets you exposed to the business, which businesses can be hard to learn. And then I've seen people go all over. You know, our chief research officer started off as a research associate. So she is an executive. She reports into the CEO. She joined Forrester right out of college. We have some sales folks that started pretty entry level, grew. They're leaders within an organization. And so those are the types of positions. I think it's important to follow your passion. I went to college for communication disorders. I wanted to be an audiologist or a speech pathologist. I was well on my way back to doing that. And like I said, the day after I finished, I was with Capital One already. And they said, hey, we have this recruiting coordinator job. You want to try it out? And I did. So I think it's okay to take a role and learn that it's not the right one for you. I think that's better than trying to fit yourself into what you think is a perfect role. You know, you're young and you have a lot of career ahead of you.
And what about skills? Is there anything in particular that you would highlight as kind of your most sought after skill that you need?
Yeah, it's interesting. I went with our CEO several years back to, I believe it was an alum school that either his son or he was an alum of. And one of the students asked him that question. And his answer surprised me considering we're a research and advisory firm with all this data, quantitative and qualitative. And he said, someone asked him, if I come out with a liberal arts degree, like, what does that mean? The presentation, the public speaking is really important. That is one of the skills that I think you want to come out, you know, whatever if you're majoring in education, of course, there's prerequisites and all of the degrees that you need to have. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to stand in front and build that confidence. And in front, that could be across the table, it could be over the phone. But you want to have those strong public speaking skills in order just to present yourself as someone who knows what they're talking about, even if you don't, which a lot of the time I have no clue and I just speak with confidence.
Great, thank you. What about Connor? What are your kind of trends that you're seeing with roles that are open right now, and what are the skills that our graduates and students need to kind of meet those needs and challenges?
Sure. So this is pretty uniform. The schools that we work with offer really great entry-level opportunities for early career teachers. Like I said before, independent schools, if you're not familiar with them, there's no requirement for teaching certification or previous experience in the classroom. Typically, schools will really value someone from a liberal arts background. Ideally, it's someone who's taken extensive coursework in the subject that they want to teach. Maybe they have some experience working with kids or with younger folks. Like it could be camp counselor, you were a part-time coach, you volunteered at a location that had kids in it, or any sort of experience can be twisted in a way that creates a narrative that schools will be really interested in seeing. So these entry-level roles that schools offer, they're really nice stepping stone positions and they can be treated as such. So when schools in our network historically are coming to us asking for early career folks, what they're looking for is someone who's ready to commit a year or 2 years to this teaching experience. And they're fully immersive. So I mentioned before, I did this experience. I taught history, 9th grade history at the school that I worked at. I was also helping out with their baseball team. I was an advisor to some students. I was working in some student clubs. It was really kind of multifaceted, and I was a jack of all trades, so to speak. And that's really what these schools are looking for. And it made the experience feel like, to me, that it wasn't a job. It was really enjoyable. I learned some skills that teaching that are really transferable. I got to continue with a sport that I really enjoy. So these are really great, robust, pretty multifaceted roles that are available to younger folks. And they're 1 to 2 years in the sense that they're not volatile, and the fact that you see a 1 to 2 year contract and you may think that you're going to get booted out of the door at the end of that year, which was definitely not my experience. The schools are treating them as, like I said, stepping stones, potentially transitional positions for you. So it could be something where you ultimately go to a grad school, go in a different direction. That's kind of where I am right now. But definitely a lot of ability to stay retained at the school and to teach in the long term. So even now, during this uncertainty of the pandemic, these schools that we're working with are still offering those types of positions. They are very likely going to have different components to them if there's a virtual aspect, or if the school's functionality of on-campus is going to be different, which it almost guaranteed will be different. But it's I guess the general takeaway is that we work with a lot of folks, a lot of schools that are hiring younger folks, early career people who have some sort of teaching experience or a teaching interest, that they may not want to commit to 30 years of teaching. And I don't blame you. That is, that's a commitment that not many people are ready to make in terms of their career. So, Tufts is a school that we really love working with because it's the type of background that schools in our network are really excited about. Ideally, the people listening today have had experiences where they've crushed it in the classroom, they've done some other things on campus, and they want to have a really fun, cool experience teaching where they can continue working with that subject matter, but also get immersed in the school in some other way. So skill sets, I guess, for that is, academic breadth of experience is good to have. Some sort of experience working with younger people is great too. But then also just be ready to be a sponge, so to speak, and soak up different opportunities that may be present at the school environment, because that's what schools are really going to look for, and that's going to be how you stand out in this marketplace.
Great, thank you so much. And Tamika, what kind of roles is Dana-Farber have open right now, and some of the skills that you look for when you're talking to early candidates, early talent graduates?
Yeah, so I could honestly say now, Dana-Farber, we're on a partial hiring freeze because of everything happening, but our positions are starting to trickle open. We do have a new satellite campus that's opening in Chestnut Hill in January, so we are ramping up our recruiting efforts very soon. So as you're actively seeking out new opportunities on Dana-Farber, if you don't see what you're looking for, I encourage you to stay at it. In the coming weeks, there will be a lot more opportunities available. What I see as far as entry level is a lot of folks who have an interest in medical, but they're not sure as to what in medical they want to do. Most times those candidates would seek out a more administrative type of role. So I do have quite a few administrative positions that would be available very soon, such as our clinic coordinators, scheduling assistants. So those are available, and quite oftentimes I see people in those roles for a couple of years, and then they realize that they actually like the operations side of medical. One of the directors that I'm working with now actually started as a clinic coordinator, and in due time, she worked her way up to being one of our clinical directors. We do also tend to see a lot of research professionals who's looking to get their hands in a little bit more of the medical research and the dry and wet labs and that experience speaking with patients and their caregivers. Oftentimes people would be in a research role for a year or two before moving on to medical and then coming back. So I see that quite often, but certainly a lot of clinical positions that we have, but there's a breadth of non-clinical positions out there at the Institute as well.
Great.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to
No,
say
go ahead.
skills, to Jessica's point, find your passion, and do know you're going to have to take a chance most times. I thought I was going to be a guidance counselor when I graduated college, and here I am in human resources, but I feel that my counseling degree certainly makes sense to the role that I play right now in HR. But you do need to get your feet wet. You need to be patient, learn something new. Someone once told me a long time ago, if your boss asks you to do something that you haven't done before, if she asks you to take part in this analytical project, do it. Just take advantage of those experiences and see what new skills you can gain from it. Is it something that you like to do? Do you not like to do it? But you have to really take those chances, certainly, as you're early in your career. Check out different industries, do your research. I know that what's important to me is the mission behind the company that I work for. So really do your research, learn about that company's mission statement. Does that really mirror you personally as well? And the connection should be natural, I feel. But yeah, Dana-Farber, we do offer a lot of clinical, a lot of non-clinical positions, and I've seen a lot of people stay, so we certainly have good tenure.
Great. All right. Thank you so much. Well, our questions went so fast, and I'd love to turn it over to John Sanford, who's the Assistant Director of our Employer Relations team. He's been kind of monitoring the questions coming in and also got some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time. So I'll turn it over to John to kind of help facilitate some of the questions that have come in from our students who are watching and attending this evening.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Sue. We've got a few really good ones that people submitted ahead of time, and in addition, ones that came into the chat, so we'll try and do this efficiently. In terms of, putting kind of a positive spin on things, where interviewing and everything is in a different format right now, how can students take advantage of the virtual interview format compared to maybe in-person interviews?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm happy to jump in. I think this sounds silly, but test what you're going to use ahead of time and leverage your recruiter. I can't say this enough. I offer all the time to prep my candidates at any level. But if you're not leveraging your recruiter to find out about, should I dress as if I'm meeting a client? All of those things that the logistical, the little tactical things, ask your recruiter. You're doing yourself a disservice if you're not asking it. And push to be in video. If they mention phone, you can say video is my preference. I think it's huge to be able to connect with the person across the screen from you.
Does anybody else want to jump in on that one? No worries if not. Cool. Let's see. So this is a question that we get a lot that maybe a couple of you can shed a light on. So the question is, I'm meeting with someone from HR. How should that interview differ than when I'm speaking to the hiring manager or future supervisor? That's one we see from students a lot.
I really don't think it should differ. So I'm jumping in on this one. Your first impression is the lasting impression though. So more than likely your first interview would be with someone from human resources. Show your passion, your reason for really wanting this position out of we have 500 positions most times that's open at Dana-Farber. Out of all 500 jobs, why is it this one that stood out to you? I'm going to want to hear that from a recruiter, but the hiring manager is really going to want to learn that too from you. So I think it really won't change. My interviews are much more informational. I'm trying to get a sense of what caught your eye. Why is this position? Why does it make sense to your career goals that you have in mind? I'm trying to make sure that there's that perfect match. And if there's not, I'm speaking with you about potential other opportunities that's available at the Institute to see if you'd like to embark on one of those. But I don't think that your interview should change from HR to hiring manager. It should be the same energy, the same enthusiasm. You always want to make sure to come prepared for your interviews and test your technologies, as Jessica mentioned earlier.
Yeah, John, I'd love to piggyback very quickly on that. A lot of people think your HR interview might be a fluff interview. Sometimes candidates are like, "Oh, I thought this was going to be a fluff interview. You know a lot about the business." HR people are business people. They know about the business. Ask them the challenging questions you would ask someone from the business.
Yeah.
What I will say though is questions about benefits, those are for your recruiter, your HR person. Hiring managers don't love those questions right away because they feel a little bit like that's the driver of interest, even though it's not, and it's really important to us. So that's one thing I would say.
Just a quick note to add, the hiring scene in education is pretty different from what Tamika and Jessica have laid out. Many schools, most schools don't have an HR or a kind of a recruiting contact, so to speak. So the interviews, I would definitely agree with what Tamika said, is really approach them the same way, is approach them with the same passion, do your research, do your due diligence, be ready to explain aspects of your resume that apply to teaching. That's definitely something that I think might be unique to our situation, is when schools are hiring early career folks right out of college or recent graduates, you may not have experiences on your resume that are perfectly consistent with teaching or really make sense like on the surface to connect to a role in the school, but be ready to create and construct a narrative and to be a really good ambassador for yourself and for your experience. And that goes across the board for teaching interviews, definitely, but very likely you may interact with a teacher or a more of a senior level dean in education. So there's no perfect science, there's no perfect formula or progression for who you may be interviewing with, but definitely approach it the same way and do your research ahead of time.
Awesome. I'm going to sort of paraphrase another question with another that I think are both really good. So given that a lot of organizations are either on hiring freezes or have sort of slowed down, and students or people are sort of anticipating like a boom when things start to ramp up again, has there been any discussion within your organizations about how that ramp up might look? And as a follow-up, when things do start to sort of accelerate again, what are some ways in which students can highlight their abilities and their experiences to sort of help them stand out?
I'll jump in. I'm just going to reiterate and piggyback on what I said earlier, which is, there are going to be roles where there are hundreds of applicants. And I saw in the chat someone put in the unemployment numbers when they were first almost done with school, and now the unemployment numbers have quadrupled. Find the people that work there and network. Be thoughtful. Don't do the shotgun approach, which is find everybody that works at Acme Corporation and send them all the same note. Find one or two people that is a second connection. Again, I love having informational conversations, probably because I like talking to adults. So I talk to my children while I'm working all day. But reach out and connect with those folks and make those relationships, and you're going to be somebody that will come top of mind for them for sure.
Awesome. One of these questions was more specific to you, Connor. So as a recent graduate interested in working in education, I'd be interested in working at a school abroad. How are your international clients, particularly in South America, anticipating receiving someone like me from the US? Also, I imagine compensation is different case by case. Does your company help negotiate this aspect when pairing a candidate to a school?
The second half of that question, or the final question there, definitely yes, is part of our role as an organization, is negotiating compensation and how that translation will take place for the candidate being hired by the school. The international picture right now is really murky, as I'm sure you can imagine. Probably 95% of the clients we work with are located in the United States, so we don't do a ton of international school placements as well. I would definitely say that I don't want to misrepresent Carney Sandro and Associates and kind of lead you down the wrong path, but definitely there are opportunities out there. We work with more kind of established American schools abroad that don't offer teaching fellowships or you know, Fulbright, et cetera, Fulbright adjacent opportunities for early career folks. So definitely take advantage of the other resources or pathways available to you. And then also the visa situation is a whole heck of a mess, as we learned the other day, at least in the United States. It is really troubling and terrible. But that's the case with, unfortunately, a lot of international partners as well. So just, I would say, do your research, think about different pathways you have available to you, tap into the resources available. If you are really dead set on an experience abroad, they are transformative for sure, but a huge kind of consideration to take right now globally. So to who asked that question, great question. If you want to kind of connect personally with me afterwards, I'd be happy to shed some more light on that. But generally, that's kind of my gut reaction to the question.
Awesome. And we have one more question that's kind of granular, but a little general for all of you. And it's one that I've seen pop up in a few of our sessions. But the question is, should I point things out on my resume or assume that the interviewer has read it? So like, how do you reference your resume? Some students in some sessions are talking about kind of awkward interviews where they're talking with someone and it seems like the person hasn't looked at their resume, but they don't want to re-walk through the whole thing. What's the best way to sort of sense that and kind of navigate that and reference without maybe just reviewing the whole thing?
I couldn't find my mute for a moment. I think so. I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I think where you can highlight your resume, do it. I will say I'd be disappointed if somebody in HR was asking you questions that was on your resume. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody from the business was doing that. We do find that a lot of people from the business, unfortunately, you know, will print out the resume, you know, not long before the interview. We're working to change that, I would say. So I would push key accomplishments, you know, anything that you feel is going to make you stand out as a candidate to the top, or find, you know, whatever job you're applying to, the resume format probably will look different, right? So tailor it for the job you're going for.
Yeah, as an education advocate and professional myself, I would definitely agree with what Jessica just said. Have an education-focused resume. Use those initial top of the page spaces for experiences that are at least adjacent to teaching or working with kids. Don't have a corporate business resume sent to a school. It will get read for 10 seconds and then dismissed. So be really deliberate. Take the time, be intentional about what you're doing and how you highlight and create that narrative for yourself, especially in education, but definitely across industries too.
Yeah.
And to add, I was just going to say those are great things that both Jessica and Connor mentioned, but the cover letters are important too, I think. So not only your resume, but the hiring managers, at least at Dana-Farber, we don't know you personally. So we want to learn more about who you are, and we find that information through reading your cover letter. In your cover letter, you should be detailing the reason of why you're applying to this position. Why does it fit with your career goals? Where do you see yourself going with this role in the next couple of years, and so forth? And through that, you could speak to your attributes and highlight your skills. So I do think when you're applying to roles, you should have a relevant resume, certainly. But in addition, if you're able to upload a cover letter, I think that would be helpful.
I think the why too, like you said, is what a lot of people, generally not just students, miss on their resume.
Mm-hmm.
The trap is sort of just rewriting your resume, but in paragraph form. But really the why of why you're applying to that organization is awesome advice. I think that's really all we have. I tried to sort of loop some in together, and I know we're at time.
Yeah, no, thanks, John. That was great. Those are great questions from the students. Sad we can't get to them all, but those were great. Yeah, so we're quickly ran out of time, and I would just ask our panelists if They're so gracious of their time, and they're willing to connect with each and every one of you. If you're interested in roles with their organizations, they'll be putting their email address and contact information in our chat area. So definitely.
We can pull that together too and send it over, because I got some of it privately.
Oh, fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
So we can send that out. Thank you. But yes, I wanted to thank everyone who came this evening, Connor, Tamika, and Jessica. It's so great that you could spend some time with our students and our young alumni to kind of help them navigate this time and to find roles that really match their passion and their interests. It's really important. This is part of the Career Center series of summer programming, and we will have some additional events coming up. One will be on jobs for federal and state opportunities. That's coming up on July 16th, so keep an eye out for that. And we will also have an West Coast, edition of our summer programming towards the end of July. And I can't highlight enough our career advisors that are in our office. They are available to talk to students throughout the summer. We're here to support you and help you kind of navigate wherever you might be, whether that's an internship or an upcoming role. So definitely reach out to the career advisors. We're here for the whole summer and wanting to chat with you. So thank you again to our panelists, and what a great event. And thanks again, and hope you have a great evening. So thanks again for coming and attending our Career Center event. Have a great
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank
No,
you.
thanks again.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.